Hello, I'm Bjorn, and welcome back to the raft. You know what that means. We're doing Thunderbolts 2. I didn't announce that I was doing this. I made no plans of doing this outside of my Discord, where I mentioned it a couple times, that it was something I was working on. I definitely didn't tell people I was going to be putting it out this weekend. So it's done, mostly. The script is plotted out, and I have it ready to go. So you might be asking, wait, Bjorn, you didn't finish a previous project. Why are you starting this one? Yeah, the Harry Potter one, the final act, it needs some time in the oven. I'm trying to make sure I get it right. So I was like, okay, I'm going to let this sit for like a month and just like really figure out how I want to do the ending. Because the original ending I had in mind, I think I've thought of something better that works within the constraints of the story better. So I'm just going to let that breathe for a second, and we're going to see what comes of that. And so in the meantime, I was like, well, I'm down to one series, which I've honestly almost finished. I already have the next episode ready to go. So I was like, I'll just start a new one that I have ready. So we're doing Thunderbolts Part 2. So for those who haven't watched the last one, this is going to be a sequel. There will be spoilers in the characters I mentioned being involved here, obviously. So if you want to go back and watch the previous one, here's the link to the full series in the annotations. Go ahead and check that out if you want. If not, I mean, you do you. I have no power over you. I'm just a guy on the internet making a video. So without further ado, let's get into our characters. We're into these relatively quickly. We've got our returning characters, of course, U.S. Agent John Walker, maybe my favorite current character in the MCU, who I used in my last movie as the leader of the Thunderbolts. Probably, likely, hopefully, how he will be used in the MCU movie. Remains to be seen if that will actually be the case, but who can say? And then I've also got his war friend and now superhuman, Dallas Riordan. Hello, Asher. Thank you for joining the video. Dog interruption. Dallas Riordan, of course, got superpowers at the end of that last movie after taking a small little injury to the chest. So it'll be interesting to see what we do with her. Of course, she will be working on becoming her superhero counterpart in the comic book, but I won't spoil that here. Y'all can be surprised by that along with everyone else. We've got Ghost from the horrible Ant-Man and the Wasp, who has the ability to phase. This movie will see her plot involving her split personality devolving a little further. We're going to focus in on that a lot and give her some good characterization. She will be one of the characters that I decide to give some more focus to. We've got Songbird returning, of course, and Speed Demon unchanged. They haven't honestly changed much in the 3 or 4 months since the previous movie that this movie will be taking place. Obviously, we lost a couple members in the last movie. We lost Zemo and we lost Bullseye. So we did need some replacement members. So who are our replacement members? I know there's probably some rampant speculation about who I'm going to choose. And of course, I'm going to use Atlas. Look, I like Atlas. He's in the original run. I'm not going to discuss too much about how I'm using him because he doesn't come into the script until near the second half. So to mention how he's involved would be a spoiler to the actual plot of the movie. So I will instead briefly talk about what I've done to his powers. Because in the comic books, Atlas is just a strong guy. Like, he's really strong, right? He's not much different from, John Walker or now Dallas Riordan, just like a super strong guy. And I was like, we could really use something a little more unique. And I was trying to figure out how I could take the strong guy angle and rework his powers to make him stand out amongst the other Thunderbolts. And I settled on his other name, which is Goliath, he's sometimes called. And I was like, hey, let's take that name and use it. So I'll say that he's able to increase his size in varying muscle classes. He can get bigger and bigger and bigger. Not like Ant-Man big. I'm talking like he can add a couple feet to his height. And every time he does, he gets increasingly stronger or increasingly quick. So the smaller he is, he's still pretty strong, but he's fast. Maybe not as fast as Speed Demon, but quick, agile. But the larger he gets, the slower he becomes and the stronger he gets. So he's constantly shrinking and growing in battle to try to increase his strength or speed wherever needed. That makes him a little more dynamic, makes him a little more interesting, and it fits the overall character design and theme a little better. I won't get into his origin story because honestly we're not going to talk about it much in the movie. He's just going to appear as Atlas, already having been around the block. I think that's the simplest way to do it. He's a fairly easy character to understand, so there's no need for a complex backstory for him like someone like, let's say, Speed Demon needs. Alright. Our next character, the next character I'm going to use is another alumni of the original Thunderbolts, who will also be appearing in the second half of this movie alongside Atlas, and that is Mach X, who is a sort of Iron Man-esque villain. He is a super genius engineer who has created a tech suit for himself which he has used to commit a series of robberies among other crimes. It works more like a glider suit, like it has wings, something more akin to Vulture than Iron Man, but less Vulture-y. I think you've seen this character's design in the original Thunderbolts. I probably won't change it too much, keep him sort of the same. Much like Atlas, I'm not going to go too far into his backstory or his purpose in the script. I'm going to leave most of that ambiguous for now, so that you guys can be surprised by it. Now, these characters appear in the second half of the movie, so you might be asking, well, Bjorn, are you going to keep like just 4 or 5 members of the team in the beginning? Well, there is one more character I failed to mention, the one I'm easily the most excited to talk about. I mentioned in a Discord post, in Bjorn Does Movies Discord, you can join below if you want to get little hints or teasers, that I was working with some legacy characters that people knew, and one character that I was going to completely redesign, like I did with something like Flatline or Chemo. Take the maybe aesthetic or basic idea of the character, and then change where they are, i.e. like what team they're on, and their whole personality and backstory, to make them fit better in the narrative I want to tell, while keeping the core of the character the same. So the character I lasered in on was one with a power that I have been mildly obsessed with for years. That power, insect control, and the character, Queen. This is I guess a Spider-Man villain. I couldn't really peg where she's actually a villain, and I'm not really too big of a fan of the comic book counterpart to this character. They've kind of got like that weird power creep thing going on, where what starts as the ability to control insects, already an immensely strong ability, as you will no doubt see in my script, sort of snowballs into now she can control Spider-Men, or anyone with insect DNA at all, which is just, it's frankly, it's stupid. I'm going to say it straight up, it's really dumb. I don't really care for that, nor does the character really jump out at me as something interesting. I don't read the description of the origin and the idea of the character outside of the power and go, this character grips me. I want to understand what this character's thing is. So how am I going to change Queen? Pretty straightforward. Her origin story will tie directly into the theme of my movie, which is dark. So briefly, before I talk about what I'm doing with Queen, let me talk about the plot of this movie. I will be calling it Thunderbolts Legacy of Power. Cool name, I know, but as the name implies, it focuses on the legacy in the aftermath of the death of the power broker. Now you might be thinking, well, Bjorn, who's your villain going to be? It's a secret. It could be anybody. The villain for the sequel could be anybody. It could even be the same as the villain for the first movie. That would be insane, right? You'll just have to wait and see when I talk about the villains. But the movie will narrowly focus in on one specific real-world problem I want to talk about, and it's a very dark topic. You don't see brought up like ever in superhero movies. Very rarely is it brought up in comic books, so I figured, hey, I want to take a crack at it. That's human trafficking. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube, so we're going to have to play this by ear. But if this gets demonetized or I feel like it's getting shut down, I'll just add a censor bar and put the words on the screen. But, it's a very big issue. It's one that you see talked about from time to time, but isn't really talked about because it's not really something that's flattering to bring up. Much like a lot of real-world issues, it's not fun or engaging to learn about. It's sad. But it also is something that can lead to some very interesting origin stories for characters. What happens to the sort of people forced to live through that circumstance? And it's rough a lot of the time. I've done some actual research into how this works, and it will be factored into the script. I had already kind of set this plot thread up in the last movie purposely because I had already planned this movie when I wrote that first one. You'll pick that up pretty quickly as you're watching through it. So, Queen is another one of the power broker's little experiments. Unlike most of her previous experiments, she was never able to get Queen to join her cause, so to say. Queen was unreliable, uncontrollable, and so since she was a young girl, she has been kept sealed in a laboratory, experimented on and augmented to make her insect controlling abilities better. Some of you might be able to guess where her powers came from, where the power broker was able to get the ability to control insects from. So she has been locked in this facility, and of course the Thunderbolts stumble across her, which really kickstarts the plot to this movie. She was taken from her family as a young girl and sold, basically, and is now wound up a monstrosity created by the power broker. Someone who's been locked away and sealed off from the outside world, someone who's had almost no social interaction at all, and has not talked to anyone outside of scientists who experiment on them in a long time. It's a very sad origin story for a character, and one that I think is very interesting. Normally this character would sound like a villain. It's a very similar origin story to Homelander and The Boys, but I don't want to do that. I want to present this character as something hopeful, that maybe there's a chance for someone like her to follow a better path, because she was taken by the Thunderbolts instead of someone who might have been a negative influence on her. It's a cool character with, as I've said, an amazingly cool power. On the surface, controlling insects might seem weak, but the more you think about it, it's a not only visually cool power, but an interesting power as far as its strengths. I've talked a lot about Queen because she will be one of the main characters of this movie, very highly focused on. That will make more sense as you see the movie. So, what is the movie about? Who are the villains and what is the plot? The plot is pretty simple. The Thunderbolts are cleaning up the aftermath of the Power Brokers Empire. They're tracking down her last labs and dismantling them, while they're also stopping bad people or whatever else they need to do. While cleaning up one of these labs, they run into Queen, obviously, sealed away in her little room where she's been experimented on for a long time. And while they're trying to extract her, someone else arrives, the villain of the movie, who comes for revenge on the Thunderbolts. It's not the Power Broker. She's not really in this movie. I lied. I tricked you. I misled you. Get tricked, nerds. The actual villain for this movie is none other than Sentry. Those who know Sentry know one or two things. One, apparently he's supposed to be the villain for the new Thunderbolts movie in the MCU, which I had already planned to use him as a villain before I even knew about that, which is insane. I guess great minds think alike. The other thing you might know about Sentry is that he's like Marvel's Superman. He's just like a Superman ripoff, and I mean, yeah, that's exactly kind of what he is. But I wanted to do something different with Sentry. I wanted to make him more interesting than just a Superman ripoff, because let's be real, evil Superman is a very tired trope at this point. We've all seen evil Superman before. We all know the trope. It's been done to death, and frankly, I'm sick of it. So instead of saying my Sentry is evil Superman, I'm going to say he's something different that happens to have the same powers as Superman, because I'm going to keep it close to the comic books, at least in their abilities, not in their origin. So who is Bjorn's Sentry? Well, Bjorn's Sentry is very similar to Queen. He is a trafficked child who has found his way into the Power Broker's hands. Although, unlike Queen, he has been molded in the Power Broker's image, raised by her, basically. He is, as she calls him, her Sentry, her guardian, her right-hand man, and he is extremely powerful. He was created by an experiment done by the Power Broker to mix almost all of the power she had together, something she tried again to a lesser effect with Taskmaster. Sentry is unique and perfect. He has all of her powers basically combined into one. He can fly. He has super strength beyond any other creation from the Power Broker. He can shoot lasers from his eyes, just like Superman. But at the core of it all, he's just a broken child who has been manipulated and misled by the Power Broker. Sentry is something I've not really done very often on my channel. He's a sympathetic villain. Now, I like sympathetic villains, but I think there's a time and a place for them. I think they're often overused at this point in Hollywood, and I've kind of always just liked a really mean bastard, like someone who's really unredeemable. But for Sentry, I wanted it to be something else. I want the audience to sympathize with him and very much like him, so that when he comes in conflict with the Thunderbolts, who we also like, there's some inner turmoil in the audience even. I described the Power Broker as ruthless and calculating when I first described her in my, writing the Thunderbolts video, whatever. For Sentry, I will describe him as relentless and brutal. He is extremely powerful and extremely angry with the Thunderbolts because they killed the Power Broker, someone who was basically like a mother to him. And he's come for blood. When I say Sentry will have a body count, you better believe it. The Thunderbolts should be very afraid of him. He isn't going to be sort of goofy, evil Superman. He is going to be scary. I kind of wanted to have the same vibe as Nightshade in my Suicide Squad stuff. When she comes on screen, you know someone's going to get hurt and that she's going to kick ass and be dangerous. And I want the same vibe for Sentry. Now, I've talked a lot about Sentry because I'm very excited to show you my portrayal of him. So the plot of this movie will be the Thunderbolts, for lack of better words, running from Sentry, trying not to die, doing everything in their power to learn to fight back against them, to find some weakness and to survive. And it's a very different movie than my first one, much darker, as you might have seen in the themes. And I think dark is pretty much the right word for it. It's good, it's got some levity moments, it's funny at certain points, but it's also brutal and sad at other points. And I think it's probably one of the better scripts I've written in concept. We'll have to see when I write it out how good it is. It is interesting for sure, very different, very much of a departure from my first script. And it will be what I would like to call the Empire Strikes Back of my Thunderbolts trilogy I planned out. This is the darkest one, and one that's story moments will carry on going forward. So y'all can expect the first episode of that at some point, probably after Justice League Dark. I thought this would be a fun surprise to drop on y'all and figured you weren't expecting it. Let me know what you think about the characters in my pitch in the comments below. If you have any ideas of what's going to happen, let me know. I always like to read through the comments, and I'll respond to every single thing you put down there, even if you just tell me that I'm ugly or something. I'll just go, hey man, that's out of pocket, and then I'll cry about it in secret. But that's the part y'all don't get to know. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Yeah, that's really it. I'll see y'all in the next one.